Hello, and welcome to the Grow Places podcast, where we explore the virtuous circle of people, growth, and place. Brought to you by Grow Places and hosted by our founder, Tom Larsson.
Ailish, thanks very much for joining me today on the Grow Places podcast. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Tom.
No, not at all. No, it's a pleasure. And I think it's going to be a really useful conversation talking about heritage, townscape, their impact on cities, what that all means. So why don't we start at the top then, sort of, what is heritage, what is townscape?
They're connected elements of the built environment. Townscape's highly influenced by heritage, and together it's quite probably the more sensitive elements of, an urban place or place in terms of what that is. And it's just something that's been quite interesting to me as from a very young age. I was just interested in cities and how they worked or how people used places and spaces. And it was more kind of over time realizing, with urban design as a background, that's where my kind of interest led in finding out what townscape and heritage was, really through discovery. It wasn't until London I really understood what those elements were, and then came across the type of consulting that I now do. And it's just how we now influence through, adding in design or master planning of an area, that just really kind of interested me in how you can make positive change to an urban environment or a city even.
Yeah, because it is particularly somewhere like London, heritage is a really important part of the place. But so some people, we heritage means multiple things, doesn't it? It can mean where you're from. It can mean sort of your values. It can mean physical things.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously here we're sort of talking more about the kind of the physical world and heritage in that sense. And London is a historic city, but other places around the world are too. And so how do you see this kind of balance between heritage and progress, and how does that kind of filter into your work?
Yeah, so that's really fundamental to the work we carry out on a project. Our approach is, in terms of how we contribute to a team, we coin it to be a critical friend. So, giving that sort of review to the context that a new design is responding to. And so that's quite important for in terms of delivering something that's positively adding. As heritage and townscape consultants, we're very much of the constructive conservation. So not being preservationist about, historic elements. In some cases, highly designated heritage assets, or, it all comes down to how significant that element is. So in some cases, more of a conservative approach is actually the appropriate approach. But much of the projects, or the majority of the projects that we're working on, you do need to have a level of pragmatism in the approach to conservation, because you'll have we find out what is important, or what's the significance of that building or that place or park, or it's all types of elements that make up our urban environment. And then really, through the design development process is so important to have that conversation, to look at possible options, as in there's many different approaches that can be taken to a building or a place, and to have the time to really think that through, with the architects, with all the other disciplines that play a an important role in terms of the public space in between built elements as well. So in terms of being constructive, it's part of our job is to highlight elements that do need to be retained, or a certain approach that needs to be sensitively taken, but also identifying the opportunities where new design can add in an interesting way, and really, in some cases, actually, enhance is a term that we use in our work, but enhance that element that is important to that building or that place. And that's what's quite satisfying in our work, when we do feel like this is in the right direction, and obviously we get the critique as well through the process that we engage with the local planning authority, design review. So that's kind of our approach in terms of looking at that. There's been some interesting projects as well where there's an intangible heritage that is part of what we assess and need to consider, which is more the kind of cultural, or it's the human part of the history of the type of heritage that we look at in the built environment. And it's quite different depending on what the element is that we're looking at.
Yeah. So it seems, kind of know from working with you, it's a incredibly kind of layered sort of process, isn't it? You've obviously got layers of history and culture and heritage, and within that, but then sort of how sort of subjectively and objectively you can kind of assess some of these things, and I don't quite know where you think it is on that kind of spectrum between sort of subjectivity and objectivity, because a lot of it does feel kind of about judgment, and I know you have different categories. You've used the word preservation and enhancement and some of these things, but maybe could you sort of maybe in layperson's terms kind of explain what those mean and how you kind of come to a decision about whether something is appropriate?
Yeah, so we do in our work, it is professional judgment that we're bringing to a project, and that comes from experience or knowledge of approaches, possibly applied elsewhere that work as a precedent, which is really helpful, especially for, getting a point across and, seeing something work well in its built form. And that's very helpful for any, member of the public to see, oh, okay, I understand what you're trying to do here. And I guess we do a lot of research to back up what the advice is that we're providing, based on, what is the baseline assessment, what are we dealing with here? But then there is quite a lot of research, or, just on a general basis, within our team, we're very just interested in design in the historic environment. So there's a lot of research or knowledge that we're bringing to a project, or we'll also discuss projects as a team, because we'll be able to bring to it maybe a personal or example projects or architects that are well known for a certain type of approach to be appropriate to that building or place. So there's kind of an accumulation of knowledge, I guess, as us in terms of being a consultant, and as a team as well. Kind of the strength of our advice can actually be collaborative in how we bring that to a project. And then also, it's highly important that we're not designing. The architect is the designer. We provide information to the designer so that they're able to formulate the design rationale that they feel is the appropriate approach to a building or a site. So I'd say it's done in a collaborative way, and it's rooted in knowledge of design, knowledge of the historic environment, and then it's going through the rigor of review amongst the team as well, to come to something that is contextually responding, or how we would consider it to be appropriate in approach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as you say, everything is very nuanced, isn't it? And working with respected team members in a collaborative fashion is super important. And if I was to give you two kind of quite polarizing perspectives, which do come up, and I'm sure they come up in your work. One is that cities are about preservation and history, and neighborhoods shouldn't change, and we should respect what they are today. And the other is that, well, cities are dynamic places. They need to change. They need to grow. Society needs X, Y, Z things, and we shouldn't really sort of worry too much about the past. We should look forward. Obviously, the truth is somewhere in the middle, often with these things.
Yeah.
But how do you sort of think about those perspectives, and sort of plot a path through that?
I think, yeah, there's some tension between, yes, preserving what's important of the past, and looking to the future of how we're adding in the current day. From my perspective, I believe that cities should have an adaptability to how the world changes over time. It's a very different context in terms of the digital world we now operate within versus, the historic past, where that just wasn't the case. So we do need to be dynamic in that way to what basically places are for people and how do we use places. And there are important elements of the past that, they enrich our urban environment for a start, but they also, they bring a lot of the heritage that it brings to people, as well as in understanding their history, and and then having that kind of realization of we're rooted in our history, but actually we are progressive as a population. So it really is kind of preserving what's important from the past, but allowing new and positive design, or a new layer to be added in our cities. We see that as in London as an example. It's rooted in settlements over time that have evolved and changed the makeup of the city. And then there was an opportunity for a replan, following the Great Fire. And plans were drawn up, and it could have been quite a different city in terms of more of a formalized street structure. But that wasn't what was followed. Actually, we've ended up in a city that is, as interesting as it is, because it's got quite an organic, centralized, rooted in Roman and medieval, and then areas that have added to the growth of the city, and that is that growth over time, which we should allow in terms of how we look at cities now and facilitate change, basically. And it's true for another good example would be a city like Barcelona. And that's, from an urban perspective, it's one of the cities that, well, firstly, it's a great city. It's like filled with culture and has history in its foundations as well. But it actually went through a very, there's a historic formal planning that is still held to be quite a good example of how you could plan a city. And that's, it's dense, but it's still human in how, there's a human scale to it. And that's just one of those places where you can see how a formalized urban plan has worked very effectively, but there's still additions that are happening, or there's still growth being allowed in terms of a city that is used as precedent for that type of city planning. But yeah, so just to use those as examples of how a city must be allowed to evolve, but in a way that's sympathetic to what's important about its past.
Yeah, no, that's a really good good analogy and a good example with Barcelona, because I was going to kind of ask you about other cities and other examples. And one that comes to mind for me is Paris and the kind of like the Haussmann planning, and you mentioned density there, and I'm really interested in this dynamic between heritage, townscape, and density and growth. You could kind of put that in, and you've kind of touched on that already, but using Barcelona or Paris, they're dense mid-rise type cities. Other places like parts of London or parts of the Far East, or maybe emerging markets like the Middle East, it's more of a kind of a point block and public space type density. Do you have a feel for those, or how assessing heritage or townscape harm or benefit in those contexts?
So Paris is an interesting one because it's quite different to London in the fact that, there is much more of a preservation of the historic city, and then the, newer, taller development being in a very specific location at La Défense. So that there's they're very contrasting parts of the same city. But that's a lot to do with what the character of Paris is. And, you enjoy the city for that very character. But it has been very much, as in planning led, as in, like you say, there's protections across why that is so. And there was at a point some kind of leaving those type of regulations. But it was determined and based on judgment, I guess, by Paris and people who are, managing the growth of their city, felt that, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to bring in, so much change to this part of the city. And I think, well, it's appropriate to Paris because it is how we, it's it's the identity of that city. And then if you contrast that with London, there's a contrasting dynamic that you find in London, which again is characteristic of the city identity. And that's seeing, historic buildings backdropped or neighboured by a very modern and different modern building. So you're seeing a contrast of the past and the future. And, to most people, that is interesting. But there will be opinion that, that's not appropriate. But in terms of coming back to that constructive conservation approach that we take in the built environment, that is, clearly you can appreciate that's a building, from 1700s, and that is a building of modern age, more recent. So clearly people being able to read and appreciate those buildings for what they are. So just to kind of, for me, that's important to a city and its identity. And world cities are so different to one another. And that's why, it attracts different people, or you're reading something of the culture. So again, it's a human influence on how a city evolves and what the character is. Just recently, having been to Chicago, and somewhere I've always wanted to visit. I work on projects that are tall buildings and tall building structures originating from Chicago, and then you have the caliber of architects that have built or lived or come from Chicago was just amazing to finally see it in person, because you can't really replace seeing a building or experiencing the building instead of just reading about, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright or Mies van der Rohe, and getting to see somewhere like Chicago, which is just, it's got a really strong identity for its own, you know, for it being a city. I'm very confident, I would say. And then you see that with, you know, the Chicagoans or the people you're meeting, and and they're very proud of their city. And it's just this, it's what makes a place interesting. You know, what are we doing? We're creating places, and are they enjoyable to live, work, visit? I guess that's comes back to what interested me to get into urban design or the built environment from the beginning.
Yeah, and well, also congratulations for running the Chicago Marathon.
Thank you.
And so you were there obviously for those reasons, as well as seeing the city. And so interested to know kind of why you personally, you know, put yourself through that. It's not something that I've wanted to do, I must admit. And also what your experience maybe was as a runner, as a kind of, you know, we've talked about cities in the kind of the abstract a little bit, or in the macro looking down, but actually being a user of cities, running through the streets of Chicago, how did that feel to actually be there and to do that amazing thing?
Yeah, that's like really good question, because that was my biggest takeaway, was experiencing, and through the marathon, which it wouldn't be my normal way to visit a city, but it just enriched my understanding of, you know, the people of the city, because I've met a lot of people, you know, that were also doing the marathon, or getting to talk to them, or engaging with in a way that was not just as a tourist. Obviously was a tourist, but as someone, as a user basically of the city, and something that they were really well prepared for and celebrating. It was. So it's not my first marathon, but it was one of the probably standout experiences I've had, because it is exploring somewhere new, and you know, you're picking up that's something that, you know, I like to do as well. But through doing it, it just felt different to other marathons I've done, where everyone's cheering you on, like in other places as well. Like London is, you know, renowned for you know, the same their race here, and the crowds that come out to it. It's like London in its like best light. But something I took away from Chicago was just how much people were getting behind you, and they don't know you. You know, like I was really being encouraged along the route, because you have your hard moments where, you know, you're struggling, and you're kind of thinking, oh, I could maybe, you know, I've run enough now, I can maybe just call it a day. But yeah, people digging deep for you and like really just rallying. So I was just really impressed by how much people were cheering you on. That you see elsewhere, but it was just just so much energy. Like the city has a lot of energy, and that's what you kind of pick up as well from, you know, going around seeing, you know, they place a lot of they invest a lot, as in there's a lot of emphasis put on public place as well. You know, so like Grant Park, and they definitely appreciate those elements, and supporting public people, you know, transport, navigating the city. It's quite a walkable city. You know, it's quite big, but you can kind of make your way around on foot, which is great because you see so much more on foot. And actually, it's that sort of serial vision that in how we experience a city or a place, and that kind of comes back to like. One of the urbanists who really kind of focused on that was Gordon Cullen, and I find that to be so true now, and particularly in the type of consulting I do. When we're looking at, you know, we're assessing a site in terms of heritage and townscape, I really do kind of put myself in the mind of the user. And that kind of serial vision, and your takeaways are like, where are the moments of interest, or like how we navigate through an urban context, or it is really important in terms of is it a nice place to be? Are people attracted to that place or that city? They're all, it's each element that are combining to the collective urban environment. Which I think led me to the role I'm in terms of it's, one plot at a time, but actually it's how, we're fitting together in terms of, stitching or piecing together.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And I think that dynamic nature of experience is really, really important, isn't it? And that's how we all live. We all live at eye level, and we all kind of walk around places or travel around places, and that experience is totally different from a static CGI or a view or a wireline image or whatever it might be that can get taken out of context. And I think what a lot of you've talked about in the past sort of 10 minutes or so is very much about context, isn't it? And about locale, and about kind of an interpretation and appreciation of what those different places are, and maybe what they aren't, and what they could benefit from, and that kind of being the sort of the why to develop, and the why to attribute maybe some kind of benefit to development and to places as they are and what they can be. And I think that's kind of fascinating. And then you've also kind of touched quite a lot on kind of the process and how you work. And I know from us working together at Truman Brewery, that kind of iterative, collaborative, kind of collegiate process of having different voices around a table and different perspectives, all looking at the same kind of opportunity from different ways. So how do you see that process, both within the industry, but also, I know a lot of what you do is public facing as well, whether it's presenting to communities or to councils or inquiries or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so Truman was an excellent project to work on, and the team it was kind of an exceptional project for the fact that, we have multiple excellent architectural studios coming together. So that brought with it a very interesting collaboration in how we all looked at things, and how, from my perspective, what I was, focused on is, a certain aspect. But there was a lot to pick up through the DTMs just ended up being like quite a workshop every time, because, there was different elements being looked at, but you were always taking away, that's something maybe I hadn't considered. And it got me thinking slightly different then about, okay, what's important. And it's good that you've picked up on the views that we use they're a representation, but and actually as consultants we get criticized quite heavily for why we've picked that position, or why we haven't put a number of positions from a certain location, but we use that in terms of representing what it is to be at that location. The recommendation, it's, how we set it out in our methodology, is we recommend the person reading our report would actually go to site and, see what the representative view, because it's to see the proposal, what is the proposed, and you're thinking about the future of the site. So you really have to understand, well, what is it to be in that place, and to be somewhere is not just visual. There's so much in terms of, how we experience a place, and that can be sound, or, the kind of background context, or how you arrive somewhere. There's so much to a human experience. So it's very hard to get that across in a photographic view. But that comes back to that serial vision as well, of experience of place, and what is the context and what's important, and being able to then help the reader of our document to understand what we're trying to achieve in the project. So it's trying to get the description across, describing for a user in the future, this is what we're proposing, as in this could be the future of this site if built. So it's really, understand or being able to relay that, and for any member of the public to be able to pick up our document and kind of make sense of, hopefully, a lot of what is probably a lot of technical work behind the scenes, but being able to understand from just that human perspective of, okay, this is what the proposed development is trying to achieve here. So yes, and it can be quite different depending on the context, what the project is, what the project team is. But definitely our assessment and elements that we were highlighting or focused on were elements and ideas that came through a very collaborative design process, and engaging with one another and actually questioning one another. It's what I was mentioning earlier about how in our team, like, when you're presenting a judgment, it is good to sense check that. And, as a team at TTC, that's, really helpful for us to do that when we're working on different sites and thinking about things from different perspectives.
Yeah. And so why do you find this all of interest in them? Why do you do it? Why is design, cities change, but also communicating that to people, why is that important to you?
I think what's attracted me to having that interest in cities, I think it really is that it's possible to introduce change in a way that makes a place better, like it's better for people to use. And I guess for me that purpose is there in a role that I believe in, and so it's that sort of job satisfaction, or to try, no matter how kind of like small a contribution that might be, but it may be important for someone or for a place that we're using. And and the built environment is hugely important for everyone, and particularly the public spaces in between. Private should work with the public aspects, and just being able to maybe bring positive influence to a project or a small corner of a city, or or what that might be. But I do believe that it's really beneficial to people and their everyday life, really.
Yeah. And what do you think some of those benefits are for people?
It could be something as simple as how enjoyable their commute is. That can be connected to like the infrastructure, but also part of their walk to. They're doing it 5 days a week, possibly. How enjoyable is that? Or are people inspired to maybe visit somewhere, access to places that are surprising? There's a sense of discovery. It really does. It really enriches. It could enrich a part of it. A very like normal part of your day, or it could be something quite exciting that people will visit, and just get some enjoyment from that. And if we can do that in places that feel unsafe, or that they're actually quite negative, like that's a big positive to be able to improve on an area for people, because it can really maybe inspire people, or take pride in where they're from or their place. There's a lot of potential to enrich people's lives, basically. I think it comes down to that for me, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good way of putting it. And is that why you think personally you've sort of ended up in London and working here, and
I think
some of the things you value about the place?
Yeah. My family, I think, are still surprised that, it's the urban environment that I've been attracted to. I'm actually, from the west of Ireland, from the countryside. And And so I think it maybe was surprising that I was attracted to more of the city and urban context through interest. Unsurprising, London was attractive because it is just a fantastic, it's a world city. And I'm still surprised all the time by, what the city has to offer. And how people can, have a capacity to be quite kind, because cities can be hard and, toughen people up, I guess. I think I think London, unsurprisingly, I am attracted to being here, and I enjoy living here. There's no kind of, I still like to visit other cities, and you're sometimes, wondering, or there's a curiosity in other places. But London just has all those layers and all that kind of potential. It's that opportunity of, that positive change again.
Yeah, absolutely. Ailish, thank you much for your time today. It's been really, really great conversation. Really enjoyed talking to you about all of these aspects, which often are super important, but often maybe aren't kind of contextualized in the way that you have. And I think that's really, really helpful for me, and hopefully for others to understand that, and to bring it all back really to kind of to people and place, and to working together with a kind of best practice lens, but doing it in a way that is local and appropriate for any one place. I think it's a really important message. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Tom. And great seeing you and chatting it to you today.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Grow Places podcast. For more information, visit growplaces.com and follow us at We Grow Places across all social channels. See you next time.